Hey there,
Hello.
Sherman. Hey, how's it going?
Good, Derek. How are you?
Doing all right. I'm happy we're able to have this tonight.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mentioned the Zoom problem to some others, and they said well, I guess it was later in the day. They didn't get interrupted. So
Yeah, I think it was this morning around I maybe checked the first time at 9, and then I was looking on like Twitter and on the internet and everything, and it was apparently like a global outage. I don't know what the issue was, but not a good day to have it on the first day of school for most.
that's right. Yeah,
Probably a lot of frustrated parents, you know.
yeah. Well, it's amazing how we're all going to be counting on that service that we didn't know anything about 6 months ago.
That's right. Yep. Me and my roommate were talking about how lucky they are. You know, it's like one night, probably 90% of the population didn't know what Zoom was, and then they woke up and the biggest industry standard, right?
Yeah, yeah. They got a lot of other options, but
Yep. All right, I'm pulling up your bio here.
hang up. Got to turn off my phone.
No
Get
problem.
too many weird calls lately. You know, they broke out of landlines to cell phones with,
Right.
this is your electric service and we
Right.
want you to forget it.
Um,
All right, so I need to share screen.
yep. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen,
Okay.
but and then once I read your bio and everything, I'll let you know when you're good to go.
Now, let me just test it for a second here. There we go, slideshow. Yeah. Okay, good. That
Perfect.
works.
Looks great.
Now how do I unshare?
There should be, if you like hover the mouse at the top, there should be a like stop share button, or maybe it's the bottom right.
Yeah, you are sharing, recording. Oh, I see. There's a pause button. Pause, share, stop share. Yeah.
There you go. Cool. So Angie should be joining us just in a moment here.
Okay.
And I sent out your checklist at around, I think it was like 2:30 or 3 p.m. today. So hopefully everybody was able to get a chance to
Good.
download.
So I could hold it up and say, you each should have gotten one of these.
Right, exactly.
That's good.
All right, I'm just gonna grab some water and I'll be right back.
Yeah, I got 2 glasses of water here.
There you go.
Is there enough coming from here? Oh. Let me test. If I put on this, I have a small fan over here. I'm going to turn it on. Let me know if it makes any difference.
Okay, sure.
If it's far enough away that doesn't make any audio difference, it helps me. So that's
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. I can't tell any difference. You're good.
all right. Good.
I have a tendency to not have everything prepared until 15 minutes before, so I'm just getting this together.
Yeah, well, take your time, stay cool. How do we have, like you said, 30, maybe 30 people signed up and maybe 15 or 20?
I think we were up to 43 actually, so
Oh, that's good.
yeah, getting up there. It's been a busy Monday for Jumpstart for sure. Angie, I'm sure, is lucky to have a break for a little bit. It's been, yeah, you would think in in times like these, loans would maybe slow down and we would have a little bit of a breather, but it's like busier than ever. It's crazy.
Really? Wow. So people doing projects and
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. A lot of people are doing projects, and more so than anything, I would say people are applying for projects. So there's just a lot of loan apps to go through and figure out which ones to move ahead with and not. And a lot of the times, God bless our jump starters, and they're great, but sometimes they don't do their 100% due diligence. So it's a little bit of back and forth trying to get all the information that they should have just provided initially, But hey, that's how it goes. That's the nature of the business of like a first time developer. You gotta hold their hand a little bit, I guess.
Well, yeah, and there's so much paperwork to do, and it's all got to be done a certain way, and then you find out 3 weeks later that you didn't sign the back page, something like that. So.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's a lot of back and forth. Oh, can you send this back and put the correct date on it? Oh, send this back in the correct OPA. It's a lot. Email is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. There's still some healthcare won't let you use email, and some other places you have to go through these portals, but that's okay. Email can get overwhelming. I keep unsubscribing to things.
Yeah.
And new ones pop up.
Right.
But good. I mean, I guess yeah, maybe some of the lending and funding agencies had slowdowns back in March or April, and maybe now they've got resources to help people again. So that
Right.
would be great.
Right. Well, what we actually did is we deferred their monthly interest from April to June. So they cut a little break there, and then we also were extending our loan payback periods to 12 months. So, to 15 months. So typically we only do like a 12-month loan payback period. 12 months from whatever your settlement date is when you got to pay. But for any loans that we accepted in the past or between April and June, we deferred it until 15 months. So it kind of gave everybody a little break. And from what I've heard, everybody's been pretty appreciative of that. But
Sure.
I think just the market really has just been untouched from what we're seeing. Is like, if anything, it's booming. It's people are buying certain types of houses. It's interesting. You never can predict these sorts of things.
Yeah, we have a good friend who's actually my daughter's friend age, but she's a realtor in South Philadelphia, and she's just selling more stuff than ever.
Right.
She goes in the house first with a mask, then comes out, then they go in the house, then
Right.
they come back, then they talk. It's got to be well orchestrated, but it's happening.
Yep, that's sort of what we're doing too. Is it's we're doing in-person site visits and inspections and everything, but they're socially distanced and masks on and trying to limit crowding rooms and such. But it's definitely one of those industries that doesn't really need too many safety measures to get the job done, which is good.
Yeah. And construction can happen too, as long people aren't jammed together.
Yeah, well,
they got room.
One of the first things that came back, if I remember correctly, they that even before retail or anything like that was open up, they commenced construction.
Yeah, we had a project renovating a historic building to a hotel, and so at the same time of doing the last tests on all the equipment and getting it ready to open, you can't open the hotel.
Right. So, yeah. That's the biggest roadblock of them all, huh?
Yeah. But I think this month they're actually opening to guests, but they can't open the indoor dining. So they put tables outside, and there's a little sort of courtyard space. So they're making it get started.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how they're adapting. It's it's like some streets are being completely taken over by tables. I think down at the beach, I saw some pictures of places where they closed entire avenues and just said, "This is the restaurant area now."
That's a good way to do it.
Hey, gotta do what you gotta do. All right, I left my notepad downstairs. I'm gonna go grab that. And I wanted to ask you if you have any ideas of other speakers, we could invite on. Please do let us know, because we're running, get to the bottom of the barrel here. It's funny. People usually don't respond until after their session time has passed. You ask them, "Hey, can you come on for September 14th?" And they'll reply September 15th. Oh yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have any ideas or any connections, please let us know. We'd love to have them on. It could be anything related to real estate. Nothing. Anything that you think a first-time developer would find information from. Just let us, yeah, you can just let Angie or I know, and we'll reach out and see what we can do.
Yeah, I will think that through, pass it on. I just before this at 5 o'clock, we had a meeting from our AIA Committee on the Environment, and we have 4 subcommittees now. So this was a discussion all about the AIA 2030 goals, of trying to get to net zero, improving over building codes, and a lot of sharp people and a lot of good insight. Not as many deal with renovations on the smaller scale. So, but I know probably a good person would be Jeremy Avellino. He does affordable housing, and it is green design, passive house, and he's a good talker. He's a good talker. So I'll suggest it. Oh, there's Angie. Okay, we haven't met yet.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Nice
Hi.
to meet you, Sherman.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for doing this evening.
Sure. It's my sort of education hat. I was teaching at Drexel in the architecture department for more than 25 years. So
All right.
usually, small groups, not Zoom lectures.
Sure. I don't think anyone's really that used to these yet.
Right. We're getting there.
I don't think I mentioned, Sherman, I'm a student at Drexel. I'm a third-year student in the LeBeau College of Business.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Oh, good.
Maybe we'll cross paths when the in-person classes resume.
Well, I still come to the architecture thesis reviews.
Oh, okay.
I'm a guest critic, and I've been doing that for the last 4 years. And that's very exciting. It's really, when you see people who have, it's a 6-year program, and you work through, and then you get a whole year to work on your project.
Right.
And a lot of them go back to their homes, and they find neighborhoods and towns. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Help them think it through.
So Angie, for the welcome and end slide, should I just put August 31st, like JUMPinar networking session, or?
Yeah, I think I might have forgotten to send you. Yep, it's in a draft. Here we go. I'll send it to you right now.
Okay, cool.
There we go. Yeah, I think I called it Jumpstart Networking Session.
Great, cool.
And then the following Monday, it'll be an off day since it's the holiday.
Sounds good.
Right. We got an extra Monday coming up. It's like there's a Monday before the Labor Day Monday. Good. Yeah. So Derek was saying you folks are really busy right now with people who are getting their applications together and getting started.
Yeah, it's a little surprising, I guess, considering the uncertainty in the world, but people are putting in a lot of applications, and we have a pretty large training program that'll be starting up here in the fall as well. I think, how many folks now do we have, Derek, that have signed up?
At least 75, I think.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know what the count was, but a lot.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great. And,
Derek, you have Maeve's name still up there on your.
Thank you. Good catch.
We share an office Zoom account, so we always
sure.
Right. The best when I join into meetings that are totally not Jumpstart related. Like I joined into a meeting at the radio station, and they're like, "Who the hell is Maeve?"
Yeah, I thought about development getting out. I haven't been to the Wayne Junction, the new brewery there yet, but I heard great things about it from some friends that have been there for outside dining.
Yeah, I haven't been since they started. I've seen pictures though, since they've done all the outdoor stuff. I went like just a couple weeks before everything shut down. It was the first time I went there, and it was wonderful. It's got a great indoor space too, but the photos of the outdoor dining look really great. I kind of hope all of this outdoor dining that's happening continues even once things are like open. I love it. I live in Chestnut Hill right now, and they've taken like certain restaurants have taken over parking spaces as like little parklets. And I'm like, I just want to keep that forever and just have like expanding into the, you know, the what's normally the right of way of cars, and it's becoming more pedestrian. So I love it.
Absolutely. I've been talking with friends about doing that around our little Mount Airy village, you know, the corner of Green Street and Carpenter.
Oh yeah.
And people park on the corners and they run in, just clear off the corners, make enough room for some tables, chairs, some plants.
Definitely.
Be more civilized.
Yes. Yeah.
But, and there are restaurants now. Yeah, I just saw Trattoria MoMA has a driveway and they've put tables outside. So that's right on Germantown Avenue.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, so it's 7 p.m. So I'm gonna get the broadcast started, and then I'm gonna share my screen first, and then after I give the little biography of you, Sherman, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. Oh, so you got 8 attendees. Okay.
Welcome everybody to tonight's JUMPinar. We're just gonna give it a few minutes for people to join in here, and then we'll get started.
I hope people are not too hot where they are. It didn't get as hot today as they said it would, so that's good.
Definitely humid though. Definitely humid.
Yes. JUMPinar. So this view options. Exit full screen. Yeah.
Welcome everybody to tonight's JUMPinar. We're just gonna hang in there for a few more minutes, and then we'll get started.
Oh, someone's got her hand up. Oh, I see there's a chat. Good evening. Right.
All right, so it looks like the attendees here have leveled off, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to tonight's Jumpstart Germantown JUMPinar. Tonight we have Sherman Aronson, who's gonna tell us all about green building, and he has a great presentation for us, as well as some tangibles that you can get. You should have gotten an email earlier from me that about his checklist, and I'm sure Sherman will go over that in more detail. But if you haven't gotten that, check your inbox. I believe I sent it to all registrants. You should be able to just pull it up and have it alongside while we go through the presentation. Before we get started and I introduce Sherman, Angie, you want to give any updates on Jumpstart Germantown?
Sure. Anyone who hasn't joined us before, I'm Angie, and I'm the director of Jumpstart Germantown and Jumpstart Philly, and we are accepting applications and we are making loans right now. So if you have a project that you're interested in, purchasing, renovating, and either selling or renting out to tenants, definitely submit your application. You can find all of our information at jumpstartgermantown.com and jumpstartphilly.com. And thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Great, thanks Angie. All right, so tonight we have Sherman Aronson. Sherman Aronson has over 40 years of experience in architecture, preservation, and sustainable design. His project management expertise has focused on transit and rail projects, historic preservation and adaptive reuse of landmark buildings, new office construction, and the renovation of academic facilities for higher education institutions. As a senior associate with BLT Architects, he has managed the green design of a dozen certified projects with a combined area of more than 6 million square feet and a total construction value of over $3 billion. In addition, he leads quality assurance review efforts, working with the design teams to achieve and maintain documentation that works for each project and client. He's a longtime resident of Mount Airy and Powelton Village before that, and has owned and rented 2 rental properties in addition to his family residence. So without further ado, welcome, Sherman. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Okay. Well, let me say hi to everybody and a little wave. And I guess you may not have printed it out, but you would have gotten this list that Derek mentioned. And that's really the outline for this talk. And the talk is going to cover a broad range of the aspects of green building, sustainable design, with a focus on renovation of older buildings, existing buildings, and historic buildings. So I'm going to share my screen and go through the PowerPoint. So each of these discussion points, there'll be illustrations and photos.
And Sherman, while you're doing that, I forgot to mention it. If you have any questions for him, you can use the Q&A function. You just click the little tab at the bottom that says Q&A with the 2 chat bubbles, and you can type your question in and we'll bring them up when they're relevant. And if there's any that are left over, we'll get to them at the end.
Right, yes. So it'd be good to perhaps collect them with each of these 7 or 8 topics, but whatever comes up, we'll feel free. Okay, so we just had an outline of what we're talking about, a little background on what's green building and what's important about it right now. And then mostly we're going to use LEED version 4, the US Green Building Council's checklist for new construction, major renovations, as a way to navigate all the aspects of green building. And then we'll have a brief discussion about these 6 or 7 additional green building certification programs that are available out there and being used every day. And then we can recap some of the major goals and approaches. So background there's a group called Architecture 2030, which started back in 2003 or 4. Architect named Ed Masria, who had a long career in green buildings and now runs this foundation. And these charts are showing what's happened with energy use and carbon dioxide emissions in the last almost 20 years. So just to help navigate, across the top, the gold line is the actual growth in the US GDP, 26% over that period. And floor area, the building sector, has gone up also, about 18%. Meanwhile, energy use has been a little more level. It's gone down almost 2%, which actually is pretty significant because the building area has gone up 18%. And then the bottom line here is CO2 emissions. So why would that be going down more than energy use? Well, part of that is that the way we produce electricity and fuels is using more solar power, wind power, and actually natural gas, which uses a lot less carbon emissions than coal and oil used to do. So that's a pretty good story. That's a 40% difference from the high that it could have been. On the other hand, across the world, the global chart that shows the same data, it's also gone up about 30%. Floor area has gone up but carbon emissions are still rising slightly. And some of that, I'm sure, is growth in Asia, China, India, other economies that are, in some sense, sort of catching up to the rest of us. So there's still a lot of work to do to get emissions down. What does that mean for the construction industry and building operations? For many years, the industry and experts have put together a pie chart like this, and it's varied a little bit. But, you know, when we think of CO2 emissions, we probably first think about our cars and buses and planes, and that is, transportation is a big factor. That's about 23%. Industry, the actual buildings, manufacturing, the places that make stuff, that emits a lot as well. But building operations is 28%. That's the heating, cooling, running appliances in our buildings. And also the manufacture, fabrication, and construction of concrete, steel, and aluminum is huge, 22, 23% of emissions. So that's almost half of all the global emissions are related to the buildings we're involved with. So that's sobering to know. So what is LEED? What is the U.S. Green Building Council? And I know some of you might remember Earth Days over the years. I think the first Earth Day was in April of 1970. And back in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of environmental work trying to clean up. If you were young back then, air was really hard to breathe in cities. It was smoggy. Water got polluted all the time. There was acid rain. Fish were dying. And it's amazing, when about 20 years, that got almost all cleaned up. But at the same time, in the late 90s, scientists were realizing about the Earth warming up, global climate change and heat. And all of these factors came together. So the U.S. Green Building Council tried to join interests among designers, architects, builders, manufacturers, educators, people involved in all the aspects from the quality of our air and water to how much energy we're using. It was a bold thing to do, and it brought together a really big consortium. And one of their goals was to come up with a criteria that are measurable, that could be discussed in a way that's meaningful, and hopefully come up with something as simple as a label. You know, I don't remember when they started, but labels for food, nutrition labels came out, and it tells you how many calories and how much sugar and how much protein. Well, the idea is to have something like that for our buildings, so we can see at a glance how they're performing. So since this started about 20 years ago, it has grown in a number of ways, and there are a variety of green building certification options. This checklist you see in front of you is a standard way to track all the aspects of each of these factors. And we'll get into this a little further, and it comes up with a score. So this lets you figure out which factors you can comply with easily, which you might be able to, which don't apply, and you come up with a score for whether you can get to be certified silver, gold, platinum, depending on how many points and credits you can achieve. They also came up several years ago with a guide to LEED certified homes. Now this is a little more geared to new construction, new residential construction, but it was a way to interpret these same categories to make it understandable and easy for homeowners. Think about insulation, water use with your plumbing fixtures, heating and cooling, the kind of materials you use, glues, paints, adhesives. So the same notion of all these categories of green building can apply in many scales. So what do we mean by location and transportation? Some of these, I pose these as questions rather than an actual checklist, but they're questions you can sort of ask as you're starting to evaluate projects you might be doing. Are you using an existing building? That saves a lot of embodied energy in the building. Are you in an urban setting with a lot of services and shopping and people can walk? They don't need to drive everywhere. Can you use public transit to get around? Do you have access to bike racks and a way for a bicycle network in the neighborhood? Can you use less parking than code might require? And if you have parking, can you have charging stations for electric vehicles? And there are a lot of electric vehicles that are not just Teslas. So they're going to become even more common as we move ahead. So what does this mean? How do you evaluate this? Well, on the left, you see a map. This is of a location in Center City, Philadelphia. And there's a radius of a walking distance. And there's a list of all of the variety of services that you could get to within a half-a-mile walk of that site. And it needs to be at least 10 different services, you know, banks, beauty parlor, restaurant, a fitness center, a pharmacy. The more, the better. On the right is something that started a few years ago, and this is kind of fun to do. You can enter any address in the country in this walkscore.com, and it will give you an array of information based on crowdsourced feedback about that site. So for green building, we mostly focus on these three questions. Is it easy to walk around? Oh, so this site, that dot on the map, is the intersection of Chelton Avenue and Germantown Avenue as a test case. So it's a really good walking area. It's pretty good for transit. There are buses, and it's a longish walk to get to the train. And it's pretty good for bikes. So that tells you quite a lot about the site. Elsewhere on the site, it has information about all the facilities nearby. It has information on local prices, on crime statistics, on education information. So it's a very useful site. Now, other aspects of sustainable sites besides location is once you've picked a site and you're planning a project or you're working there, are there aspects to consider about excavation? Are you cutting up the ground? Are you building an addition or making a basement? Can you protect the adjacent areas from runoff from soil and water coming off your construction site? Can you look at a site assessment about that whole site? What is the climate? We know the climate pretty well, but does it have views? Does it get daylight? What community features are nearby? Does the site around the building, your open space, encourage planting? Can you make a garden? Would that help wildlife habitat or birds? Certainly in our neighborhoods here, birds are flying through all the time. They take advantage of every tree and limb. Open space. As you're planning your work, is there a minimum requirement from zoning? And can you make more open space? Is there rainwater? How is it managed? Now, if you're doing a renovation and you're not building an addition, then pretty much you can use the roof that's there and not have to make changes. If you're making an addition with more impermeable surfaces, then you might need to put a green roof on a flat garage or think of ways to capture water. And vegetated roofs or light colored roofing material. Now, there's some debate in the Philadelphia region. We're right on the cusp between winters and summers, but still the evidence seems to be that a light colored roof helps both to reduce heat in your house, and as each year it gets hotter in the summer, but also it reduces the heat island effect on your neighbors. So what are some examples of this kind of question? On the top left is a green roof that we did at Penn State University many years ago. That was their first experimental green roof, and it's flourished very well. On the right, you can see ways to protect inlets, stormwater inlets, or drains in the street if you're doing work, and white roofing material on the left. It used to be pretty unusual 10, 15 years ago. Now you can get TPO roof, EPDM roof, PVC roofs. They all come in white material or a light color. Water. Water is another major component. Over the years, all over the country in different regions, we're lucky right here. We seem to have plenty adequate supply of drinking water, but as part of the whole world system, it's an issue. So when you're planting lawns or planters or gardens, you might want to reduce irrigation as much as you can. But one of the things you can really control is kitchen and bathroom plumbing fixtures. It's amazing how many water-saving fixtures are out there now that do even better than the 1992 limits. So I don't know if you remember, but I think when I was growing up, toilets were 6 gallons a flush. Then they went to 3 gallons. And then in 1992, it was 1.6. And now you can get 1.28. And these are available. There's no extra cost. They work really well. They used to make extra noise when they had compressor tanks, but not so much anymore. Showers, 2.5 gallons per minute is the code. They make terrific showers that work at 1.5, 1.7. And if you, like some people in my family, might take a 10 or 20-minute shower, that's a lot of water. Same with faucets. So these are all things that you can choose as you're planning your project to be conscious about and use less. Central HVAC systems, not that common with a cooling tower, but that's possible too. And if you have separate tenants, especially commercial tenants, you probably use a separate water meter, which helps make them responsible. And water heaters used to be oversized, so it's better to use an efficient water heater. Here's an example of calculations we did for a project. And there are a couple of these calculator forms where you put in the number of people and it estimates how many uses of each plumbing fixture there is. So you can see here, the baseline following the 1992 code would have added up to 346,000 gallons in a year. The design is 240. We're saving 100,000 gallons of water a year in that one building. That's more than 31% savings. And that's without anything exceptional being done. We've had some projects where we got to 43% less. Now, energy and atmosphere is, of course, a big topic. I broke it into two sections here. And there are a number of questions that fall into each one. So a first question as you're planning your project, it depends how complicated it is. If you're renovating a house and all you have is a boiler serving hot water radiators and you don't have air conditioning built in, that can be pretty simple. But once you get more complex systems, you might want to get someone who can help what's called commission those systems. Check them out, make sure they're running properly, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do by spec, in addition to your contractor. Does the renovation include work to the thermal envelope? Are you required to do any improvements? And we'll talk about that again in a moment. If you're renovating windows, and we'll talk about that further too. There are a lot of choices in how to address windows. It's often one of the most important parts of our project, especially in a historic building. Insulation on the roof. If you are redoing the roof is a great place to put a lot of insulation, either on top or between the rafters or blown in. On a low-rise building, you can get a lot of energy savings. Light fixtures, it's amazing what's happened from incandescent to fluorescent to LED in terms of reduced power use, and many of us are really aware of that. I'll show you an example. And lighting power density is a simple calculation. How many watts is in the fixture? How big is the room? And how many per square foot? So here's an example of using an energy modeling tool to evaluate a number of energy saving ideas. Now, energy modeling is often done by a specialist. It does take software to do, although I'll show you some other ways to get close to it. But this is an example where working on this was a 3-story academic building, renovating a 1930s building. And by considering improved wall insulation, roof insulation, glazing, each one of those, you could come up with a % savings and then choose which one you work on together. And you can estimate a 30% cumulative savings, which is quite a lot on an annual basis. And in this case, 2 years after the work was done, we actually got energy bills back from the university, and it was right around that 30% savings. So we were pretty excited about that. Another tool, and this is a COM check, C-O-M check. It's what the building code requires for an energy compliance for a commercial building. And with a residential building, there's res check, which is pretty similar. It's in a way, it's a very simple energy model. And what we like to do with it is run it a couple of times and change only one thing at a time and see what the result is. So here, if you we're able to, you could zoom in. The one on the left was 8% better than code. And then on the right, it's 11% better than code. And what we did was we improved the glass in the building. We made a higher performance glass. And that has some cost to it, but it also has an energy saving. So this is a tool that anyone can get free. You can download CommCheck and you can take a tutorial. It's pretty helpful. Getting back to the code question, when does the building code require improvements to the envelope? And the section for existing buildings, chapter 500 in the ICC, chapter 5, it does not apply if it's a bona fide historic building, which means it actually is certified, it's listed with an agency, the state or the city. Also, alterations don't necessarily require meeting new requirements, except where envelope is being altered. So if you're really changing the facade of the building, then it has to meet new construction requirements. Also, there are exceptions. So if you're working on windows and putting in storm windows or surface applied film, you don't need a permit, you don't need to upgrade to new construction. If you've got existing ceilings and walls, but if what happens is when you open up a ceiling, tear off some plaster to put up new drywall, if there's no insulation, you are required to put a minimum amount of insulation in there, is my understanding. But you don't have to put air barriers up. So there are some subtleties in how the code treats existing buildings. Let's talk a little bit about windows. And each one of these topics can be a whole course in itself. And I had prepared a program about window renovation for a forum we had last year. You need to consider the kinds of resources available. How can you improve the windows? Evaluate their condition first. If you have windows that are not that bad, if they're 100-year-old wood windows and they're not so bad, or an industrial building where they're metal, you might consider keeping them. And as you caulk around them, you prevent infiltration, you add a storm panel on the inside or exterior storm windows on the outside, you can get performance that is just as good as new windows. And there are many factors. This diagram on the right shows all the ways air moves through a window and around a window. So some of the considerations here are put together by the reports. There are a number of really good reports from Department of Energy, the preservation organizations. This one shows the biggest return on investment, where that 7.9% is to put insulating cellular shades on the inside of the windows. Well, that was popular back in the 70s and 80s. I haven't seen it too often. People want to pretty much look out the windows, but that's the least cost and biggest bang for the buck. But then if you look at storm windows, interior and exterior, that's a pretty good return and a modest investment compared to all new replacement windows, which cost the most and have the lowest rate of return. This picture on the right, those were historic windows that were cleaned and reglazed and caulked, and then the inside was an interior storm panel, and they worked very well. Another item is lighting savings. We mentioned it before. I'm going to see if I could zoom in on this. Let me get back here. Yeah, I think I can zoom in on this. Yeah, so this was work we did in our own office downtown, an old building that was renovated 30 years ago. And when we evaluated the lighting we had, it was 8 kilowatt hours per year per square foot. It was costing over $6,000 a year in electricity. We went through 2 or 3 rounds of improvements, and then just 2 years ago, we replaced all the linear fluorescent lamps, those 4-foot and 8-foot lamps, with LED versions. This is a inexpensive LED, $7 a tube now, works really well. And you can see that that cost per year went down to $1,400 a year at a fraction of the energy. And what also is important is PICO. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the PICO Smart Ideas program. They really have been going outreaching to builders, owners, architects to say, look, if you're doing anything that's going to save energy, they will help with incentives. So for every $7 light bulb we replaced with LED, they gave us $3 back. That's pretty good. And in this project, they actually gave us a check for like $2,500 to do $3,000 worth of work. So there are resources there, and not just lighting. They do that for refrigerators, appliances, heating and cooling equipment, boilers, furnaces. It's worth following up. So that gets us to heating, ventilating, air conditioning. And a big decision in any project is what type of heating system do you use? Many of our residential buildings don't have central air conditioning. It could just be a boiler system and hot water radiators. There's still a choice of high efficiency and super high efficiency gas boilers, or you can get all electric systems, heat pumps that can do both air conditioning and heating. And that's pretty common now. You probably are all familiar with heat pumps. What's relatively new are VRF systems, variable refrigerant flow. This is a way that makes the heat pumps even more energy efficient. They're all looped together. They each have condensing units on the roof, smaller distribution of the units around. It's like a split system, kind of. Can be very remarkably efficient. Also, is fresh air provided? Now, this is one of those balancing acts in green building for 20 years. It's healthy to have more outside air come in the building and go into the ductwork and get provided in the supply system. On the other hand, if it's winter or hot summer, you've got to treat that air more and use more energy to make it comfortable. So there's a trade-off. One of the things that helps with that is called the energy recovery system, an ERV, or a heat recovery ventilation system, where there's a box and it's got two paths. And so as your waste heat, your exhaust goes out through your bathrooms or toilets, it goes through a duct, goes through this box, and the incoming air captures the heat that's going out or the coolness that's going out. And it preheats or cools the outside air. Can save a lot of energy and make things very comfortable. We'll talk about passive house for briefly coming up, but passive house is another green building rating system that's mostly residential, and their focus is an energy recovery system that's ventilating all the time, all year round, and it modifies as it needs. And people say it is really very comfortable and very efficient. Other questions are there chemicals in the refrigerant systems? Most air conditioning units now have less HCFCs. It's still worth checking. Also, green power. Once you've done some of this work to reduce the loads, a lot of what we're talking about, adding insulation, adding storm windows or replacing windows, using higher efficiency lighting, higher efficiency appliances. The goal is to reduce your whole load and your demand for power. So then it makes it easier to buy green power, which you can do directly from PICO or through a third party, or you can buy renewable energy credits, which are investing in solar and wind power anywhere in the country. Also, a consideration is to manage your project to allow rooftop solar panels. Now, Philadelphia has a lot of rooftop solar going ahead, a lot of support, Solarize Philadelphia, number of groups. You may not have the budget to put that in yourself now, but you may want to think ahead to allowing that to happen. Energy systems, HVAC systems. I'm not a mechanical engineer. I'm not an expert on it, but Passive House, again, has put together a number of conferences and discussions, and people are sharing a lot of information about making efficient systems. And all I want to point out from this slide is the idea of making sure it's constructible, that you've got good barriers for the air to prevent air infiltration coming in and conditioned air going out, that you use energy monitoring if you can to see how it's performing, and plan for your apartments to be compartmentalized. So that means each unit is a little more airtight, separate from the other unit, which can be especially important if people are smoking in one apartment or not, and that's another question. But just making each unit stand alone so that you're not sucking air in from the apartment next door into your apartment. And bathroom and kitchen ventilation. Again, this is an energy recovery system. The one on the right is a central system on top of the roof. The one below is a smaller one that could be in a closet. And sometimes you can just work with an oversized bathroom exhaust that runs all the time, and you allow air in through what's called trickle ventilation, a little slot above the window or a little small duct someplace in the exterior wall. A whole different topic, materials and resources. So I think you're getting a flavor for how this Green Building Council brought together all these different ideas into one system, one way of thinking about it. Because in a certain way, materials that you use doesn't relate directly to energy use, except how they're made. So let's talk about this list a little bit. Simply recycling. We have recycling in the city. We got to make it easy for our residents and tenants. Contractors doing work can generate a lot of demolition debris, a lot of construction waste. So they should be urged or required to collect it and recycle it off-site rather than let it pile up around the property and then just go to a landfill. FSC wood, if you're buying new wood materials, you can buy wood with a label that has been grown responsibly in a sustainable wood forest source. It does cost a few pennies more, but if you're not buying a lot, it's worthwhile. How much of your existing structure are you retaining? Are there interior partitions you're using? And are your renovations approved by a historic agency if it's a historic building? Life cycle impact study we'll talk again about in a moment. And what about recycled content in the new materials? That's one factor. Local materials that are produced or made available nearby. And something relatively new, environmental product declarations. And I'll show you some examples of that. And health declarations, product information about the chemicals that went into making the product, how the workers in the factories may have been exposed or not, and how it might go into the air in your space. Most products now are pretty good about that, but you can really get detailed information. So stepping back a moment, waste and recycling, planning ahead for where the recycling happens, where the waste machines are, where the dumpsters are, preparing a chute on a larger building, especially that keeps the debris from flying around in the city, collecting valuable recyclable materials, metals, glass, wood, collect them on the floor before you take them outside. And these are two kinds of environmental product declarations. These are just the cover page, but here US Gypsum, which makes lots of products and lots of good quality stuff, they have a product declaration for each brand of gypsum board they make. And this is one page, and then it has 5 or 10 pages about all the products that go into it, the life cycle of making it, how they reuse the waste material in the factory, how they collect it at the end of a job. The other is some products, a whole group of manufacturers get together. In this case, companies that make hollow steel tubes, structural steel, round and square tube shapes. They put together one EPD that addresses all the products made by members of that industry. So that's very helpful. These are both guides that are available online. They're available from the manufacturers. They're available, a lot of them from this UL. When you, whoops, again, I forgot how to, there we go, zoom in. UL label, which you're used to seeing on like electrical devices. Well, UL now is one of the major leaders in environmental product declarations. So they have quite an operation in testing and approving. So what does life cycle assessment mean? That is an idea that has been brought into the green building realm again in the last several years. And there are four main factors. What is the impact on the environment by producing the product? Have they been dumping chemicals in the water supply nearby? Do they stockpile their waste materials next to the forest? Or do they responsibly take things to a recycling mill? What's the embodied energy in manufacturing and installation? How much power goes into making the equipment, or take a window, for instance? What's the longevity and life expectancy for the product they make once it's left the factory and it's being used? And then what options are there at the end of its life? So if you're making a steel window that's for 100 years, what happens when it wears out? Can it be recycled? If you're making a PVC window that's good for 20, 25 years, what happens to that? It might just get disposed. So these are concepts that can be actually measured and compared. And picking materials, you know, sometimes it's a lot of fun, sometimes it's challenging, but it's amazing the range of choices we have in our industry. But nearly every product, whether it's carpet or wood veneer, plastic laminate, solid surfacing, glass, tiles, luxury vinyl tile flooring, paints, wall coverings, it's all a choice. And many of them come with information about how they are made, whether they have recycled material, whether they have an EPD for how they're made. A lot of this luxury vinyl tile flooring now is actually made pretty responsibly, which is a good thing because it's become very popular. And then on the right is just a map to remind us a 500-mile radius from Philadelphia gets us past Ohio and down to South Carolina, but there's a lot of ocean out there too. And then the 100-mile radius, well, that's pretty local. So it'd be hard to build a building where everything comes from within 100 miles. A recap on historic buildings. This is just a few projects that I've been involved with that were historic renovations, certified buildings, and also LEED certified green buildings. So it can be very exciting to be able to do both and to work with the owners and the historic agencies to make a process where they get the historic tax credits for doing it responsibly, and they're able to announce that it's a green building and it's saving energy and water and helping the environment. Indoor environmental quality has to do again with what goes on inside our spaces. And both the quality of the air, the temperature, the conditions. You know, smoking is prohibited in most places now in the city. If it's allowed in a room, you need to have a ceiling of all around it and a good exhaust. Indoor air quality can be affected by the type of paint, the caulks, glues, the carpets. And during construction, that's something that needs a little attention. If you have air equipment being used while you're in construction, then you really should change the air filters before you start to use the building. And when they bring in ductwork for a new heating air conditioning system, it'd be good to have the open ends of the ducts wrapped in plastic, and any equipment that has filters wrapped in plastic. Keep the dust from getting inside the ductwork and getting blown around the building. How much ventilation is brought through? Was there any testing on indoor air quality? That's not very common, but it's happening again now, happening more now. What kind of control do the people in the space have? Thermostats for temperature? How about for ventilation? How about for lighting? Access to daylight and access to views. We can't take for granted if you've got a view outdoors and there's some vegetation, a tree, there's some daylight, it actually helps how people feel about the space they're in. Here are some pictures of HVAC equipment that's been wrapped to protect the filters. On the right, there's ductwork being delivered that is got open ends protected with plastic. On the left, it's installed and the plastic is still there. This is something that doesn't cost the contractors to do. They just need to be told, you should do this. Now, when it comes to paints, 10 years ago, I made a slide like this, and Sherwin-Williams had 1 or 2 paints with low VOCs. Now there's about 6, 8, 10 of them. So there's a range of paints from 0 volatile organic compounds to very little, and durability in different sheens, different qualities. Also CO2 monitors, not required by code, but that in some spaces like conference rooms, it can give you a little warning if it's gotten, the air has too much CO2, and then you can turn up the ventilation. What else is there? Most of these certification programs for green building also want to both encourage you to do something innovative, which could be just working with a LEED accredited professional, or it can be doing better than the minimum requirements of any of these credits, or coming up with something that's been a new test case or a pilot project. Also, what's interesting with LEED is they have regional priorities. So for this zip code for central Germantown, they're giving extra points for access to quality transit, using a high priority site that has like a brownfield or a opportunity zone requirement, rainwater management, indoor water use, and a life cycle impact reduction. So it's interesting that they've gone to every zip code around the country and evaluated what's most regionally important. And education is one kind of innovation. On the left is a displays we did some years ago when we finished renovating 801 Market Street that explained about the green renovations. On the right, the Green Building Council has a program that has a device that's like a dashboard that connects to your pretty sophisticated building automation system that'll show you how much waste is being used, water, energy. It's like a sign you could put in the lobby. There are variations on that too. So now let's talk about a few other programs. I think we still have time for that. Passive House, I've mentioned once or twice. I'm going to zoom in on this diagram on the left. This is a very simple approach, and it's a freestanding house. So, this shows air coming in from the lower level in the basement using a heat exchanger, an energy recovery ventilation system. And then the outside air mixes and becomes the supply air. The exhaust air comes back in, and it's captured on its way out. This could be in the basement, it could be in the attic, it could be in a closet, but it's part of their principle of making things work. And Passive House started in Germany, so if you go to passivehouse.org or .com, you'll wind up at the German version. Passive House US has its own organization, and they're doing a lot of work all over the country, a lot of the East Coast. Here's a project in Philadelphia that was completed last year. So that's one. Another is a program called WELL, and it's from the International Well Building Institute. And it's related to the US Green Building Council and LEED and some of the same categories, but they focus more on the quality of the interior experience, the quality of air, moisture, is it filtered? Is water been tested? Is it clean? Is there water fountains and hydration? Are you avoiding allergies? And is there access to food in a healthy way in the building? What kind of daylight glare control, color quality, fitness, encouraging people to take stairs instead of elevators because it helps your muscles and your heart and makes you feel better. So they have their own scorecard. This rating system has been getting a lot more attention in the last several months in response to the pandemic. People spending more time indoors. Owners of larger buildings where people will be moving back into them are exploring ways to make the environment inside healthier, better ventilation, more care with the finishes. So it's an up and coming rating system. Another is Enterprise Green Communities. This is a program, national program for encouraging affordable housing that follows green building criteria. They have their 2015 book. They now have a draft version of 2020. There are buildings from individual houses, townhouses, row houses to high rises. We're doing our first enterprise project now for PHA, renovating a building, and they have their own checklist. This is one page of about a dozen pages with very similar questions to what we've been talking about, but they have their own way to evaluate it, and they encourage community involvement in a number of things, making spaces that people can share for activities, daycare, adult care. And they have a guide to construction, part of their criteria book. Here's an example of what they show about windows, roofs, insulation. So they again have very similar list of items on the checklist and but their own method of evaluating it and following it. It's a pretty good program. Another is Energy Star buildings. You probably are all familiar with Energy Star appliances and products. The Department of Energy started this about 25 years ago. When they take a refrigerator or a dryer or something and they check it and give it an Energy Star rating, it's probably pretty well made and it's using less energy than a standard product. Well, now they have expanded that, maybe it's 10 years ago, to buildings. And they have their own checklist and certification program, but it applies to a wide range of projects. And many buildings choose to use their portfolio manager to record the energy that's actually being used on the building. So as you get this data from your energy systems, you upload it to the portfolio manager and can see how your building is comparing to others around the country. And this score of 75 is to encourage new buildings to do better than 75% of the other buildings in the same category. And they also have a very comprehensive guide. They've got these 6 features, and each one comes with a fact sheet and a guide book with things like how to install ductwork. And the one on the left looks pretty crazy. It's not that it just looks crazy. If you tried to move air through there, it's just not going to work. It's going to bend and get done. You got to really pay attention and have it run straight through. So they give advice that's pretty down to earth, but it's good to have in one place. Another topic that's come up in recent years is net zero. Now, net zero can mean net zero energy, net zero water, net zero waste, net zero carbon. So for the moment, I've just focused on the zero code, which deals what came from the AIA 2030 movement as a way to say, okay, let me zoom in on this a little bit here. Start with a building that is energy efficient, well designed. You try to do the best you can with the resources you have. The envelope, the daylighting, the passive heating and cooling, efficient systems. You reduce the loads, reduce the power needed, and then you calculate, well, how much power can be provided with solar or wind devices, either on the site or off-site. And if you're able to negotiate a deal where all the power comes from an off-site facility and you're not buying it directly, well, then you're on the path to a net zero building. So this is a way that's meant to be something we can move to in the next 10 or 20 years. And there are similar programs, a net zero program from the Department of Energy that is geared to homes, encouraging homeowners to try to reduce the energy they need and then coordinate with solar wind power suppliers. And lastly, the American Institute of Architects has had a program for 25 years called the Committee on the Environment Design Awards. And those have been awards across the nation. They pick the top 10 projects that are not only gorgeous to look at, but also address 10 measures of green design in a really high level. Well, a couple of years ago, the AIA in general said, well, we need to adopt these rules to apply to any design project, not just the special sustainable projects. So now we're in a transition zone where starting this year in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, I've been working with our committee. Every project that's submitted for a design award needs to also have a statement about how they address these criteria. What are these criteria? They're similar to what we've talked about. Design for integration means that you've had an integrated process working with the owners, the engineers, the users, the community, whoever should have input into how the building should be planned and built. Design for equitable communities is similar. Have you engaged communities in review and discussion and comment like we have with our community organizations? But also, does it have access to good bikes, bike paths, walking, and transit, for instance? Design for ecology is encouraging use of outdoor space, greenery, and open space. Water, we've talked about, is the same water efficiency with fixtures, appliances, and irrigation. Economy is a little fuzzier. The goal there is to say, not make buildings that have way too much space per person. Try to be economical in the use of space and then in the cost per square foot so that you're not investing more than you need to. So this is a target. Design for energy, again, are multiple ways of estimating the energy being used, tracking it. Wellness has to do with the interior environment, the air quality, the water quality. Resources, like the environmental product declarations and the health declarations. Design for change is an interesting topic that's also relatively new, but when you think about it, all of us that renovate existing buildings, many times we're taking a building that used to be a factory building and now making it a retail store, or a building that used to be a school and now we're making it apartments. So the idea that we've found a structure that is good enough to keep, use, and adapt for change over time really helps our society instead of knocking them down, throwing them out, and building something that'll be good for 20 years and throw that out. So it's a matter of respect for the existing, and then if you do something new, can it be modified for other uses? And then discovery is kind of like, have you done an analysis of how the building did after you completed your project? You may do your own analysis for how was the payback, what did you learn, did you make some mistakes, what will you do next? Maybe you share that as a case study with others, or it's a lessons learned. So that's encouraging that effort. So this is another, not so much a checklist, but a framework for discussion that we in the profession are all trying to address. So a quick summary of the green points that relate specifically to renovating existing buildings: local transit, access to services, reusing the existing building, reduced water flow, energy, reducing the loads, improving insulation, reducing electrical power, considering waste, renewable materials, making ventilation and ductwork good, and preservation. These are some of the sort of top points, I would say. And then finally, a list of website links. All the items I've talked about, all the green criteria are here and available. Lots of resources out there, but these are all highly recommended if you want to look further into any of these programs. So I think, Derek, I think that's through. Did you get some Q&A submissions?
Yeah, sure. I have a few questions myself here and a question from an attendee here. And I just want to remind everyone, if they want to ask any questions, you can submit them now to the Q&A tab and we'll get to them. But I just want to say thank you so much, Sherman. That was excellent. And it's clear that there are many, many, many ways you can make a difference. And, if you can't do one thing, there's another option waiting for you right next to it.
Exactly.
And I'm definitely going to ask you for these links, and I'll send them out to all the attendees so they can have them to refer to in the morning.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess I'll get into the one question here we have from a listener or a attendee. Keith is wondering, does the walk-in score that you were asked, or the walking score that you were showing earlier, does that take into account the type of retail in the area, such as discount store versus high-end boutique, or fast food versus sit-down restaurant? And if it does or does not, do you think that determines the walkability of an area at all?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that it's indiscriminate in how it lists all the places. So it's not, it does, when I've looked at it and zoomed in, it doesn't only list high-end places. It'll list any place that is got an address there and is located.
Sure.
So it's, but certainly it makes it more walkable when the services are affordable.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's a good question, and it's a good tool. And I guess it's a little bit like Yelp, right? You want to you want to find a place where you can get hamburgers at a reasonable price, and you check it out.
Right.
I don't know whether it's connected to that, but it's a kind of a crowdsourced database.
Sure. Yeah. And actually, this is one of the questions I had for you. Is there a correlation, between the affluence of, or an area that's more affluent and how walkable it is versus an area that might not be as affluent and it's a little bit less walkable, or vice versa? I'm just wondering if there's a correlation between, if the city is putting more effort into making an area walkable that is, doing better financially, or away from that in certain areas. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, I know that, for instance, about 15 years ago, the Center City District, which is a public-private entity, spent a lot of time getting support from businesses to make downtown Center City, improve the sidewalks, encourage more art, and working with businesses. Then University City created University City District to try to support local businesses and help those neighborhoods be walkable. I think in Germantown, Mount Airy, Chestnut Hill, the main streets along Germantown Avenue have made investments like that. Mount Airy Business to bring banners, bring planters, improve the paving. So I think it's sort of a case by case. There's no central authority that's making those decisions. It's each community making a decision. And it's something that we can all help and participate in. If there's a shopping area near you and you've got ideas about how to improve it, or someone's going to renovate a building that's been empty, and now try to consider what kind of facility would be you want to encourage to lease from you that will help that community.
Right. Great. Yeah. So here's another question I had, is from the perspective of, a jump starter, someone who might be developing a property for the first or second time, inexperienced and kind of just trying to get in the game. What sorts of things can they look at initially when sourcing their properties? What things should jump out of them and say, oh, I can make a difference here, and I can change this aspect of this house. Like when they're looking at it on Redfin, or maybe when they're walking through the property, like what would you say they're where should their eyes go toward as far as where they can make a difference?
Right. Well, the, the first level of thinking is, what can I do to reduce the loads and impacts of the house? So let's say it's a house that is somewhat livable, but it needs new systems, services, finishes, repairs to make it work. Then think it through in terms of choices of how to invest to reduce the amount of energy you're going to need to do. So you might want to spend more on roof insulation on a small house so that you don't have the heat buildup and you won't need as much air conditioning. You might want to retain windows and look at storm windows that can be a much less expensive investment, but now you've reduced the cooling load. And caulking around windows, air infiltration at all the openings, ceiling penetrations through the walls. You've all been in a drafty room in the winter and you just want to crank up the heat. Well, you're going to be wasting energy. Mm-hmm. Some of the easy things are light fixtures, light bulbs, lamps makes a big difference. The plumbing fixtures, I can't stress that enough. If you're putting in any new plumbing fixtures, take an extra few minutes. And if you go through Home Depot or Lowe's, look for the lower flow fixtures. Get some advice from the salespeople. Which ones have been successful? Ask your plumber.
So we actually have a question in the Q&A about that. Jihad Ali is asking, can you inform us on where to find out more information about water efficiency products? And it sounds like the best way is to just ask the employees, right?
Yeah, and if you, I work with a plumber and I talk with him about, a name brand product, and he says, well, we can do the same thing with a Gerber toilet. It works just as well. It costs half as much.
Right.
Put one in and it works great.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess it's. I think there's ways if you're shopping online at a big facility like Lowe's, I think you can add that filter into the database that you're searching through. Okay. But if you have a plumber that you trust, that you've worked with, that's a good source too.
Okay, great. And all right, so the last question I got here for you is, it's sort of related to the answer you gave just a minute ago, but I wanted to ask, what if there was, cost is such a major concern, for anybody doing anything, but right. Especially for a first-time developer, where they're looking at the numbers and they're, unfortunately the way the game is, I guess, is that
it's tough.
All these options might come as a second thought to profit. But if there was one thing that you could do, what is the one thing that you would say is the most cost-effective way to make the biggest difference for the environment, and what sorts of things do you think are just simple fixes that you won't even need to really put down that much money to do, or if it is money, it might be substantially less than option B. Right.
Well, so talk about that, and also a sort of broader question that often comes up is, well, if you really pursue a LEED certified building project, does that cost more? And there was a couple of studies, pretty in-depth studies about 10 years ago, that evaluated 100 projects. And the answer is not straightforward, because sometimes you get a building that just costs a lot and it's not green, and then the same building is green, but the same kind of building. But generally they found on average it was about 2% more construction cost to go through that whole process and address all of these items.
All of that entire checklist you just went through.
On average, about 2% more. But that's assuming, it's not bad, but it's assuming that it's your goal from the beginning. Mm-hmm. If you start a project and later say, oh, shucks, I'd like this to be green, well, that, we've had that come up a couple of times, and you can't go backwards and remake decisions. So the first thing is to think about it at the beginning. And then I guess the most important things are each building has its own characteristics. And if we're talking mostly about energy reduction, then look at it and think, where is it most losing energy? If it's a 4 or 5 story building with a very small roof, well, then insulating the walls might be a really important thing to do. And again, sealing openings, making sure those cracks are closed, and efficient appliances and lights. I mean, these are things you don't want to go out of your way and do something you wouldn't do. So you want to make choices with the things you have to choose. So if you're putting in a new floor, you want one that doesn't have chemicals that'll make this, pollute the air that you're in for the next 30 years. So there's some of that evaluation to do as well. I hope that's good enough advice.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm surprised that it's on average only 2%. You know, I would have expected 50% more. But I think the advice you just gave, that the earlier you start thinking about it, the better. You know, even before you see the property, just start to think about looking for properties that you can make a difference on. It gives you a step ahead.
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
I did have one question, Sherman. So
Sure.
a lot of our jump starters are looking, it's hard for them sometimes to first find the contractors. So you've talked a lot about different groups and organizations that are green focused. Is there a local group or association that's like green contractors that folks could reach out to, or is that too niche?
Too good to be true.
The local, what used to be called the Delaware Valley Green Building Council, is now called Green Building United. And that's because it has an umbrella of a number of organizations, and there are many contractors, manufacturers, suppliers that are all members of Green Building United. So some of the people there might get in touch with Leah Wargo, or I could give you some names later. Alex Dawes, who lives in Mount Airy, is the executive director. They're constantly talking with representatives and people who are contractors and suppliers. And I'm sure their website has a list of sponsors. There are window supply, Pella Windows, Marvin Windows, they're all involved. So that's a good starting point.
Great, thank you.
And it may be the General Contractors Association might have a subcommittee for that, the GBCA. I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely look into that as well.
Good.
This was really, really informative. I really appreciate you doing this. And we don't want folks to think of this as just an afterthought. Like you said, like thinking of it from the beginning is definitely ideal. Just a fun story that I one Christmas all my family and friends got a low flow shower head for Christmas.
Oh, there you go.
And then the next year I got low flow toilet from my husband, and it was the most thoughtful gift I ever received. So
yeah, that's right.
So this is near and dear to my heart, and little things can make a big difference. So.
And if there are things you're using every day, if you're using a kitchen faucet every day, you feel better about it, and it helps your mood too. So, yeah.
Definitely.
And before I forget, if anybody has not gotten that checklist, please email jumpadmin at Philly Office Retail, and I'm going to send out a follow-up email tomorrow, and I'll be sure to include it there. But maybe it's something we could include in the workbook for the training program, or just kind of have on hand to provide to people, because I think it definitely covered the presentation, but it's also just good information regardless.
Yeah, it was meant to be simple questions that you can consider, and then if some of them are more important to you first time, if it's 3 or 4 things to do, that's great.
Cool. All right,
Yep.
so that about wraps it up here. I want to say next week we are going to have a special little Jumpstart networking session. So we don't have a speaker for that week, but we're going to do sort of what we do at the end of these meetings. When there's a lot of people who are trying to network, and we'll do a little Q&A and allow people to talk on their microphones and get to know one another and see what each other's needs are. And then the week after that, on September 7th, we are not having a session for the holiday. And as always, you can go to jumpstartgermantown.com/jumpinars to see the recordings of all these sessions. This one will be up tomorrow morning in case you missed any of it or want to share it with a friend.
Good.
And all the previous ones we've done since, I guess, April now are all up on there. So yeah, once again, Sherman, thank you very, very much. It was a wonderful presentation, and I'm sure I'll be sharing this presentation with many.
Well, that's great. Thanks so much. It was fun.
Right. Have a good night, everybody.
You too. All right. Bye-bye. Oh, is there a new Q&A there? Oh, Jihad. Oh.
Just people saying thank you.
Okay.
Right. See you later, everybody.
Yep.